The Para Cave Podcast, proudly brought to you by Parramatta Leagues Club, The Corner Post, Rubbish Removal Kings, Flash Conveyancing, and Wine Barrels Event Hire, Sydney. Situated on Level 1 at Westfield, Liverpool, Shop 1055 is your home for NRL jerseys, collectibles and memorabilia. Look great this NRL season and visit the Corner Post today. Tell them Troy sent you, and both follow their Instagram and Facebook pages to keep up to date of what's new. Proud sponsors of the Para Cave Podcast.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Para Cave Podcast. Go the blue, go the gold, go the Eels, our storyboard. I'll try. See you next time. Para Cave signing out.
Hi, how are ya? Welcome back to another episode of the Para Cave Podcast, and look, this one is going to be a really hard one to do. This is the game review podcast for round number 1, the Storm vs Eels game, and look, everyone knows the result now, and it was a long time ago now. It was back on Thursday night, so we don't really want to talk about it. We want to forget it, put it in the bin and forget about it, but we have to do the review about it. And joining me is Ben once again from the Corner Post. Ben, how are you going, mate?
I am going all right, Troy. I had put this in the rearview mirror and had just started feeling good about myself until maybe, let's say, about 30 minutes before the start of the Australian Grand Prix, where we saw Oscar Piastri take himself off the track on the sighting lap and knocking himself out of the Grand Prix. So I've suffered 2 heartbreaks in one weekend of sport, unfortunately.
Yes.
I think that's another 40-odd year curse there with the Australian Grand Prix as well, with no Aussie drivers on the podium ever. So, yeah, I've had better days, mate. I've had better days.
Well, yes, you and thousands of other Eels fans and also Formula One fans, including myself as well, was disappointed about that. But unfortunately, these things happen, and as I said, let's hope these 2 things are behind us now, and we can move forward for both Parramatta and also Oscar Piastri as well. Mate, before we get into it, have you heard the new intro and outros of the podcast that I premiered last week?
I have heard them, and they
What do you
are
think?
pretty good. They're pretty good, mate. They're pretty good. I think I know where they've come from, and I think it's a certain somebody that does a little bit of work for the Corner Post as well. And if that is the case, it's a pretty good job that we've got him on board, because he's a busy man, isn't he?
He is, and the person we are talking about is Mick. Mick Makes Art on Instagram, so give him a follow. Thank you very much for doing the intros and outros. I really, really appreciate it. I reckon he's done a cracker of a job, and as you said, he does some work for the Corner Post, and he also does some work for, well, I won't say competitors, our friends, the Ruck Infringement Podcast. Great guys over there. So he does some work for them as well, and he also does other work as well for other people as well. I think also Joel from League of Inches, I think he might use him for a few things as well. But yeah, give him a follow on Instagram, and if you need any social media reels, intros, outros, jingles, whatever, send him a message and see if he can do something for you, because it's absolutely great work that I've seen from him for this podcast and also the other ones as well. So well done, Mick, and thank you very much once again. Right, now we're going to have to get into the hard stuff. That was the fun stuff. This is the hard stuff. 52 points to 4. The Melbourne Storm beating the Parramatta Eels on Thursday night down there at AAMI Park. It was 9 tries to 1. Now, before we get into the game, how are you feeling? And then after Sean Russell scored that first try, how were you feeling at that point as well?
Look, I knew this was going to be a tough pick to make, especially when we were doing our tipping at the start of the week. I was pretty confident moving into the week, and then as the day sort of came upon us, I started to get a little bit more and more nervous about it. It's kind of like I've always found round one to be sort of the same feeling every year. You sort of just want to get there and get it over and done with, so you sort of know where you stand. And it was a little bit like that as well, knowing that we'd had such a high-profile week in the courtroom and the injuries and stuff that happened before the match. There was so much sort of surrounding this that I just wanted to get it done and get it in the rearview mirror, but I really didn't expect it to go the way that it did. So, look, I was feeling pretty good after Russell scored. The sin bin sort of took a lot of air out of the game. I really didn't think that was a sin bin. I don't think anybody in rugby league right now does think that was a sin bin. I'm sure we'll get into that shortly as well. But yeah, look, what do you say? What do you say after something like that? It's just, like you said, we've got to address it. We've got to talk about it. And then I'm sure after this week, we'll move on from it and look forward to the Broncos game.
Well, let's get into that head clash at the start of the game and the sin binning of Jermaine Hopgood. Alec McDonald, I should say, unfortunately had to leave the field and wasn't returning from that game. And I, like many, thought that it was not a sin bin. It was an unfortunate accident that did happen. And look, I know these days it is the NRL, and the NRL are really worried about player head knocks. And look, I understand that. And I'm all for player welfare and the like as well. But in this accidents are going to happen, and I believe that in this instance it was an accident. And the referee, I think, declared it to be direct contact to the head and gave him 10 minutes in the bin. And now I think he is facing, or I think he has accepted a one match ban for that. So I don't think it was a sin bin. What was your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, look, I thought he should have challenged it in court, to be honest. I didn't even think it was a penalty, to be honest. I got a lot of messages pretty much straight away when it happened, and each person that messaged me, I said the same thing. That was a complete accident. And the fact that, and I'm sure, again, we'll get into it later on in the show, the fact that we had a very similar situation happen the other way around later on in the game and it was ruled completely differently just goes to show how poor the refereeing was in this game. I don't want to be a home team fan here, but that was a ludicrous decision, and I don't know. We always seem to never get the rub of the green against Melbourne. So what do you expect there?
Well, I think 75% of rugby league fans, not just Eels fans, believe that was an accident and Jermaine should have stayed on the field. However, he didn't. He went to the sin bin. Probably the good thing, well, if there is a good thing that comes out of someone going to the sin bin, Parramatta ended up scoring that first try through Sean Russell, who was playing on the wing in this game, with Josh Adokar being injured and Brian Kelly coming in. It was a good try, good setup. That would have given the guys confidence. They led the game. And the other fact of the matter is as well, they didn't let Melbourne score their first try until pretty much sort of right to the end of Jermaine's sin binning.
Yeah, to be completely honest, I think when we had the man down, we actually looked at our best. We seemed to sort of open up our attack, and we probably could have scored 2 or 3 during that period, to be completely honest. We were really clinical. We were really tough. We looked like we were up for the fight. But then it seemed as soon as Jermaine came back onto the field, for one reason or another, it sort of changed. The momentum sort of shifted rather than us sort of going on with it and starting to use that momentum that we'd created with that try and the good momentum that we'd worked towards during that 10 minutes. It seemed like we sort of crumbled and fell apart. Now, what do you reckon's happened there?
Well, is that the possibility of playing a Melbourne side with 12 players? Obviously, everyone's got to step up during that period, so perhaps that may have taken a little bit of gas out of Parramatta. They were making errors at that time as well with the ball, but perhaps that was the case, because then in the 14th minute, Harry Grant just scored an absolute ridiculous try right through the middle of Parramatta, and pretty much next to or under the post, I think it was, and the heavens just opened up. So perhaps it was a fact of it taking out of Parramatta with a man down. What do you think about that?
Look, I could sort of get around that if it wasn't round one. Maybe if we're sort of talking about this same situation, I definitely hope we're not. But if we're sort of discussing the same situation in maybe round 20 or later on in the season, maybe you can sort of have that excuse there. But it's round one, and we're all fired up and we're ready to play footy. So there should be no reason to be completely gassed after 15 minutes of footy. I don't think there's a good reason for it. I think, especially that Harry Grant try, I think it really just showed that we weren't up for the effort in that game. We weren't looking to take it on after sort of that 10 minutes. It was sort of like they almost had a bit of arrogance about them. They got that try during that 10-minute period and suddenly thought that they were, they were going to go on with it. And then Melbourne basically said, well, hang on a minute, we're the round one champions for 25 odd years for a reason. And now we're going to show you why.
Yeah, no, certainly, that's for sure. And look, I must admit as well, I mean, you cannot just blame referees for the loss because you have to play the game and play what's in front of you as well. But I guess during that first half anyway, there was two calls that I thought were potentially wrong, and I'll get your thoughts on them as well. The first one was the forward pass call from Jack Williams to Will Penasini when Parramatta were on the attack. Did you think that ball was forward?
No way. Terrible call, that one. That was. Look, I don't think it mattered all that much because I think Will got taken down there anyway, but just that was a momentum killer more than anything. I'm not sure the call being wrong sort of made that much of an impact in terms of the final result of that particular play, more so than it made an impact in terms of really switching up what little momentum we were working with at the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, as you said, it was a momentum killer. Even if he did get taken down, Will Penasini, it's still Parramatta still would have had the ball, I think, at that stage. So definitely halted the momentum there, and yeah, 100%. I don't think it was forward at all. The other ridiculous call I thought was, and I think even I found out later the Channel 9 commentators, I watched it on Fox, but I think the Channel 9 commentators said it was absolutely ridiculous, and I dare say probably 98% of the rugby league community would think that, is the ball from Brian Kelly. It got ruled that it was a loose carry and it went forward, but there was no way in hell that ball went forward. It went backwards, and I actually thought he was in the motion of passing it backwards anyway as well, and Parramatta lose their challenge there.
Yeah, that was one that maybe. Again, I don't want to have to blame referees for a performance this bad, but that was one that really showed that we were playing against 15 and not 13. You sort of you see this a lot in games. I've always thought this seems to happen to us every year when we play the Raiders as well. We always seem to be up against 15. Well, depending on how many you count the touch judges as, but you've got your referee in the middle that you sort of got to work around as well as working around the other 13 players on the field as well. So having the bunker and the referee sort of not working in your favour, it's never going to get you very far. But the one that I actually had a bigger problem with was the head high contact that took away Isaiah Iongi off the field.
Yeah, well, let's get into that.
The complete contradiction in the rules with that one, that they didn't think that there was head-high contact, which I thought it was an immediate sin bin. I thought that was no different to what Stephen Crichton did, and I think it's an absolute joke that Crichton got away with that one as well, to be completely honest. I didn't think that tackle was any different at all to the Crichton tackle. I actually thought it was a lot worse than the Hopgood tackle, and the fact that they've said that it's not even a penalty, but then they've said that Isaiah Iongi has to go off the field, it can't be one way or the other. It's either he stays on the field and we don't lose him for 10 minutes, or it's head-high contact and he's in the bin.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Why should a player go off for a HIA if there was no direct contact to the head, and if there was no penalty given to Parramatta at all, why should a player have to go off for a HIA? There's certainly something going on there, and it actually that's where the six-man bench came into play for Parramatta, and I think obviously Joash Papali came in at the fullback position for Isaiah during that time, and it ended up making Sam Tuivasa not playing that game just for the fact that there was the interchanges happening, and the fact that Joash came on at that time as well. So Big Sam, he didn't get to play, and that could have been a potential bad move for him not playing, because he's a big body and he had good pre-season form, and unfortunately though we just did not get to see him play.
Yeah, look, I think that's something that we definitely need to look at in the rules as well. If we are going to use these six-man benches, obviously a situation like that, as we've said, it's a complete contradiction of itself in the rules anyway. But the fact that it's actually ended up costing us an extra forward on the bench is just crazy. Like that's such a triple blow. Not only do we not get the penalty, not only do we not get the sin bin, we get a player sent off the field for 10 minutes for no reason. Actually, a quadruple blow, I should say, because then we also lose that extra forward off the bench when we probably weren't really going to use Joash unless we really needed to. So the fact that that's happened there, and then there's nothing in the rules that sort of says, all right, you've used him for that little period throughout the HIA, now he can go off and you can go back to using your bench however you want to use it. I think there's a big grey area there in that six-man bench rule. Up to now, I've actually quite liked the six-man bench, but I think you've got to sort of protect your footy sides there so something like this doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's certainly going to get a lot to get used to, I think, this six-man bench, and coaches are going to have to get used to it pretty fast in games, just so the result can maybe go their way, because, as I said, it was a big blow not having Sam play that game, because, I mean, obviously he could have came on for Junior, replaced him as well, but as I said, he had great form in the preseason. I mean, not that preseason form counted for anything in this game, because Parramatta were the preseason premiers, and look what happened. But it would have been great to see Sam play. That is for sure. Yeah, I agree. Should have been a penalty. Should have been a sin bin for that tackle on Isaiah Iongi. That's for sure. But look, it was, 18-4 at half-time. What were you thinking at half-time at that stage? Were you thinking that Parramatta was still sort of in this game at all, or definitely they needed to be the next team to score after half-time?
Yeah, look, I didn't think all was lost at all. I was actually pretty happy that we'd kept it to 18. We did have a few really high-quality chances right before half-time that you sort of think maybe if we score that there, then we maybe sort of go on and start the comeback. But I was a bit upset and disappointed at some of the chances that came before halftime, because they were chances that we didn't score purely because of the way that we went about those chances. There was some sort of unnecessary offloads going on. There was some lack of support play runs going on that sort of cost us points. I actually thought, besides the really, really sad defense that we showed in that first half, especially again in that Harry Grant try, I think that's one that nobody on the team's going to want to see back again. I actually thought we were the better side. We just didn't take our chances when we had them. We seemed to sort of take the chances that we were getting for granted every single time that we got down there, and we were allowing ourselves to sort of, again, I don't want to say arrogance, but it did seem like it was a lot of arrogance from the side, just thinking that they were in the game when in all reality they were probably getting toyed with a little bit from Melbourne. But heading into half-time, I was pretty happy with the position that we're at considering the circumstances. I thought maybe Riles gets into them at half-time, has a chat with them, and then we move on and we move forward and then come back out in the second half and push forward. But it's not what happened, was it?
No, unfortunately. I mean, it was only 3-1 at half-time, so the floodgates certainly opened up after half-time. And as you said, look, 12 points down, that's only 2 converted tries in arrears. And I think potentially, it was the fact that Parramatta probably tried to play catch-up football too much. I mean, there was 11 offloads from them to Melbourne's 9, but I think the difference was the fact that Melbourne
At
knew...
one point, actually, just to highlight that, at one point there was a stat that came up on the screen that it was 9 offloads to 1. So that's that really shows you how offload happy we were early in the game, and then obviously we allowed that to switch, and that stat line ended up being a lot closer by the end.
Yeah, and look, I don't have a problem with that. Parramatta are known to, throw the ball about, and you've obviously got Jermaine Hopgood, Junior Parlo, who like to offload the ball, Kidione Kartoga as well. But there is a time and a place to offload it, and I think, yes, we did win the offload battle against Melbourne, but it was the other chances or the other offloads that probably weren't the best of times to do those ones that ended up costing Parramatta possession, because only 41% possession in the game. You're not going to win against Melbourne with that. 10 less minutes as well. And the completion rate there, 63% against Melbourne's 85. You're not going to win a game against Melbourne with those sort of stats, and that comes from probably throwing the offloads at the wrong time. One player that probably had a bit of a, I guess, mixed bag of a game, and potentially one of the errors that, one of the chances that you were talking about before was Will Penasini. It was a tremendous effort to get down to the try line. However, I think he probably would have been better to try and hold that ball rather than trying to reach out and score. He obviously thought that he could get there, and that's why he went for the ball. But do you think he should have just held that ball in that situation?
I think everybody in my immediate surrounding area in my neighbourhood heard what I thought about that situation at the time. That was potentially the most frustrating point of the game for me, and I think that's maybe where I really sort of, I guess, switched off and sort of allowed myself to accept what was going on. That, to me, was potentially, and we're going to get into a conversation shortly about the back line, that was, to me, potentially where I sort of confirmed in my own mind that we're in need of a reshuffle in our back line, because not only has Will attempted to get up off the ground and score that try, which I think, and I don't want to be too critical here because we're trying to sort of be positive in a negative situation, but I do think that was extremely idiotic from Will. And I think if he has that back 100 times over, 99 out of those 100 times, he doesn't try to do that again. But what was more concerning for me was the fact that there wasn't another Eels player within 20 metres of him. There was absolutely nobody there in support with him. He's just made this great breakaway. He's sprinting down the field. You could tell he didn't have the pace to get there. He was treadmilling quite a bit on his way to the line, but there was absolutely nobody around him. There was nobody there to help. So, what's the guy meant to do? Now, in my opinion, you hold the ball, you go to ground, and you just take the tackle, because we still had a full set of 6 to go at that point. So there was sort of no need to reach out and take the try there anyway. Even sort of, I guess if you're a bit closer to the line, you take it on and you have the chance. But he's a grizzled veteran at this point, and he's got to know that you've got to hold the ball there. But in saying that, it's absolutely no excuse for the rest of the team there to not support him. And that was a really, really, really concerning thing for me in round one, when everybody's fresh and ready to go, that we can make an incredible breakaway like that and butcher it so badly in so many different ways.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think if he had his time again, he would probably hold the ball and get tackled and see what happens from there. I guess at the point in the game when you're behind by so much, then you just want to try and reach out and score that try. But I dare say that if he did have his time over again, he would probably hold that ball. You mentioned their backline reshuffles. Now, it is only round one. Who are you reshuffling? Who are you moving on into New South Wales Cup, and who are you putting into first grade if you're going to do a reshuffle of the backline?
Look, I'm not going to be a very popular man with my opinion on this. And I don't want to be one of those guys that says drop them all and let's bring all the young kids up and blah blah blah. Um, I, I do think maybe three players that I was really particularly unhappy with. Sean Russell, I think he's maybe got his eye on the exit at the moment and isn't sort of putting in 100% right now. I know he did score our only try in that game. That try was a pretty good try. I'll give him that.
I thought he was one of our better players.
I've heard, I've heard a lot of people say that, but he was one of the ones that frustrated me the most on the night, if just in my personal opinion. I know Iongi as well had a pretty decent night himself, but there was a lot of areas where he could have been a lot better as well. But you can't really drop him. Penasini is the big one for me. Now, I really think he has had his opportunities to try to break out of this slump of form that he seems to have been in for the last year or two now. And I think he may need that little bit of a wake-up call with a stint in New South Wales Cup. I think it's about time that he goes down with his brother and sort of starts... I mean, the timelines for his brother in particular obviously got cut with his injury last season, but I think it was the plan for those two to be starting next to each other at this point this season. I think maybe we drop Will down at the moment and sort of start that experiment in Cup and see how it looks. I wouldn't be upset to see Jake Tuggo come up and have an opportunity in first grade, as well as the likes of Jordan Samrani and a couple of the other young boys down in first grade who actually second grade, who actually themselves had a pretty good night. They actually beat Storm pretty well on the night. So a few guys in that back line had really good games, including Jake. And I wouldn't mind seeing a few of them come up. And I think Bailey Simonson could also maybe have a stint in place of Tungo as well. So if you don't want to drop Will, you could potentially drop Bailey and then bring Jake up. You could potentially drop them both, bring Sam Rani up into the centres and put Jake on the wing. I wouldn't go for a full backline reshuffle because I think it's too much to do all at once, and you don't sort of want to hit the panic button after one game. But if we're still looking like this in 2 or 3 rounds' time, maybe you start to look to the future and see what you got.
Yeah, look, I think obviously, I mean, a lot of fans are disappointed and frustrated and angry about the result, but I don't think you can be going to make mass changes at this point in time. I mean, I think personally you just have to, I wouldn't even bother looking at the review tape. I'd just put that one in the bin and concentrate on this week's game against the Broncos. It is only round one. Look, I probably thought maybe Sam Rani might have got a start in this game, just from his pre-season form, in the place of the Fox, who is obviously injured. I probably would have left Sean Russell in the centre position and maybe put Sam Rani on the wing, but obviously that didn't happen. Look, Jake Tungo...
Let me pose a question to you another way, actually. Let's say Fox is back in 2-3 weeks now, from now. If we're still looking like this in 2 to 3 weeks and we bring Fox back in, how do you reshuffle it?
I would take Bailey out and I'd put Fox straight in.
You wouldn't do anything else there if the same sort of players are still having a bit of an off time?
Well, I think the whole side had an off night the other night, so it's very hard to, obviously pick out backline players. So I'd probably say at this point in time, if you're going to ask me, I'd say Fox would come straight in and Bailey would step out. I mean, again, I don't believe Sean Russell has got his eye on Perth already. I mean, he's committed to Parramatta for this season. He's already contracted here for this season. And he's already signed the contract at Perth anyway, so that's guaranteed anyway. So I'm sure he's not thinking about 2027. He was one of the great players in the pre-season, and look, he had a pretty semi-decent game out of a bad bunch this game. So I don't think he'll be dropped. So that's what I think.
The thing that sort of gets me there is we saw this with Dylan Brown last year, where Riles wasn't afraid to take away a player in a side that wasn't gelling right, that did have their eye on the exit, that had already signed elsewhere. That's why Russell sort of jumps out at me straight away, because I'm not sure if the way he's playing, especially at the moment, if the way he's playing really in Riles' mind would necessitate him having him there over somebody that he could develop for future years to come. I definitely think Riles sees this as a long-term project and not, trying to win a premiership straight away, which I do still think we do have the potential to take on a premiership this year, and we do have the potential to make it to finals and do have the potential to go on a deep run. But if that starts to sort of look like it's not going to be the case this year, I don't think Riles is above hitting the panic button and bringing up some of the juniors and pushing some of those guys that he maybe doesn't see as long-term options back.
No, we did see that a bit last year, where he made a lot of debutants last year, more than what Brad Arthur did probably in 11 years. But certainly we saw the likes of Joash, Riley, Jordan Samrani, and there's probably some others as well. Debut for the club last year, and Sam Tuivasa as well. So he's not afraid to raise those youngsters into the squad. I just think a lot of Parramatta fans, and look, rightfully so, because there was so much expectation going into this game. They didn't expect to have 50. Most were confident that Parramatta could break the streak and get the victory. They weren't expecting, definitely not 52 points put on them. But I just don't think there'll be mass changes. And I think also part of the problem is the contract situation with the NRL, that you're allowed to sign a contract, a year, 2 year, or a year out in advance as well. So, and that's always going to be a problem. So I think, I just don't think it's the time to be making mass changes. You've got to give these players time to redeem themselves. Obviously, Jermaine Hopgood won't be there next week, so someone's got to step in for him. Maybe Sam Tuivasa starts next week instead of being on the bench against the Broncos. We'll know that on Tuesday when the Tuesday team list comes out. But so he will be missing from the lineup. So that gives someone else an opportunity to play. But yeah, I don't think there'll be mass changes. I think you will see pretty much the same side on Tuesday, except for Jermaine Hopgood.
Yeah, and look, to be honest, when the week started and we saw the lineup, I was pretty happy with it. I thought that we named as good of a lineup as we possibly could, to be honest. But look, you'd hate to see it happen again next week. And we know the Broncos are going to come out hard. They've just been kept to 0 on the scoreboard and had a pretty bad preseason, all things considered. So they're not going to be an easy beat. It's definitely going to be a tough game, and I really, I probably really don't want to play the Broncos fresh off a round 1 loss and a World Club Challenge loss, because they're going to be fired up. But it is something that we do need to keep an eye on. So if this performance moves over into next week, I think the weeks following, you're going to start to see some changes. So something to keep an eye on, something that we'll maybe track here over the next couple of weeks as well.
Well, let me ask you this one. At the time of this recording, it's on Sunday afternoon. So we've seen most of the games completed. Now, we have seen the Warriors beat the Roosters, who are one of the premiership favourites, and we have seen the Broncos kept to 0 albeit against the Panthers, but it was a 26-0 victory to the Panthers. Obviously the Storm scoring 52 points against Parramatta. I would think there'd be more pressure on the Roosters and the Broncos, to be honest. I mean, for one of the premiership, or two of the premiership favourites to go down in round 1, albeit I guess the Brisbane Penrith game was going to be hard to pick, because Penrith's a great side, but for the Roosters to go down by so many points as well, I mean, they had 42 points put on them. I would think that the more pressure's on the Roosters, to be honest.
Yeah, it is something that we'll get into in our round review once we do get to that. At the time of recording, we're still, I think there's still about 10 minutes to go in the Dolphins and Souths game, which is looking pretty fiery at the moment. I think we've just had a sin bin actually as I speak, so that's pretty interesting. But at the time of recording, the teams that are sort of relevant to the conversation have had their time completed, and I do think that the Roosters definitely didn't show up the way that they wanted to show up. Um, but to be completely honest with you, I expected the result for Brisbane. I actually had picked the Panthers. I didn't like the way that Brisbane came out in the preseason. I didn't like the way that they looked in the World Club Challenge. I thought that they were pretty arrogant and pretty full of themselves throughout most of the preseason. And I think that Penrith sort of smelt blood in the water, the same way that Melbourne has smelt blood in the water with us. Obviously, we came in with a bit of arrogance ourselves, and that's cost us. But I think both clubs, both Parramatta and Brisbane, have a similar story where maybe they needed to be humbled in round one a little bit. So it'll be really interesting to see how both clubs respond next week and who gets the chocolates, because I think there is a bit, maybe potentially a bit of blood in the water there for either club to attack.
Well, for the Parramatta Eels and also the Gold Coast Titans, they've got to go to 2027 apparently because of the 50-point curse. But as I've said to many of people, it's only round one, and it is a long season, and records are meant to be broken. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. But I dare say at training this week, the Eels will be concentrating on defence, and they'll be concentrating on ball handling and ball protection and a few other things as well, because there is a lot of work to be done, and I think they were even training on a Sunday, so that shows you how committed they are. Who were your... I know it's hard and difficult to say, but who was your Eels player of the game?
That's a tough one, to be honest. I, again, don't want to beat the war drum, but I don't really have one, to be completely honest. I think Jack Williams was half decent in times. I think he probably stands out. Iongi had a pretty decent game, all things considered. He did make some really, really silly errors that I was quite critical on.
Which errors were they?
Well, particularly the Harry Grant try, I think he was woeful in that try on his defence. He was absolutely nowhere to be seen and left a gap the size of the Bass Strait open. He made a few other little ones throughout the game as well where, trying to force offloads and pretty much the same errors that everybody was making. So you can't really signal him out on one thing because pretty much everyone did the same sort of silly stuff. But I was pretty happy with Mitch. I think Mitch did well to show a lot of maturity, to not lash out and to not sort of spit the dummy in ways that we've seen him do in years gone by in similar situations. I think it really showed that he's a well-rounded and mature player now, a lot more than he has been in the past. Maybe give me Jack Williams.
Yeah, I think Kitioni Katoga had a good game. He was the only Parramatta forward to run over 100 metres with 121 from 13 runs. Jack Williams just under that at 95 metres. But I think Isaiah Iongi, as I said, as I posted, I think was the fan voted player of the game. But yeah, Kit Kat, he had a good game. He made some crunching tackles as well at some stage.
Kit Kat also made the second most errors in the side too. That was partially the reason why I didn't pick him, because I did think he was good in spells too. But you do have to sort of look at the negatives in a situation like this, unfortunately.
2 errors, 1 handling error for Kit Kat, and the other
a lot of attempted forced offloads from him too, which I wasn't fond on, to be honest.
Well, let's end on what I'm going to call a new segment due to one of our sponsors here at the Para Cave podcast, Wick Coffee. And look, there's probably not one that you can really point out, I don't think, but what was your Wick Coffee wake-up moment? What made you stand up and take notice?
The scoreline. That woke me up.
For me, my Wick Coffee moment was in the first 5 minutes when Sean Russell scored. So, other than that, there wasn't too much else to stand up about it either. So yeah, for me,
To,
it
to
was
be honest, I
shambles.
think maybe that Sean Russell try was the Melbourne Storm's wake up moment of the game. I think that sort of unfortunately unleashed the beast a little bit there. So yeah, hopefully next week we've got a few moments that we sort of struggle to pick. Rather than
Absolutely.
sort of struggling to pick a player of the match, we can sort of struggle to pick a moment of the match. I think that would be a bit nicer.
Yeah, no, absolutely correct. And next week's game is, of course, over against the Broncos up at Suncorp Stadium on Thursday night, 8 p.m. So Parramatta, they have a semi-decent record up in Brisbane. Obviously got them last year, 22-20, right on the bell. So look, as I said before, they'll want to put this game behind them, put it in the bin, forget about it, concentrate really hard at training, get up to Brisbane. They know they can win up there, and they will be confident about that. And look, as I said, I don't think there'll be mass changes this week. I think there'll only be one, definitely, with Jermaine Hopgood out, maybe another one somewhere, but I don't think there'll be mass changes. I think Jason Riles will give this team a chance for redemption, and to show them what they're worth. But it's going to be tough, as you mentioned before, with the Broncos losing the World Club Challenge and also round one as well. They won't want to go 0-2 in this competition in their premiership defence. So that's what we've got looking forward to. That is for sure next week. Ben, thank you very much for joining me once again for the review of the Parramatta Eels versus the Melbourne Storm, even though it wasn't a great game to talk about.
Yeah, you're more than welcome, mate. And I will end us off on a bit more of a fun note, I reckon. I've got a question for you. Do you have? Because I certainly do. Do you have any sort of in-house betting going on in your close circles at the moment for next week's game? Because I do have a Broncos mate that's quite close, and there is a little bit of a rivalry going on there for this match. Do you have anything on the horizon for this game next week?
I don't, but how about we chat about that one in the preview on Tuesday?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm
Once
sure
we
I'll
know,
have more information on what's going on for that.
once
by
we know
then.
once we know the team lists, and we can do something about that then. How about that?
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I know my good mate Arian will be listening. He listens to all of our shows. Big Broncos fan. He actually works with us at the Corner Post as well. He's one of our juniors there.
Right.
We call him Ezra Mam. So that's his nickname. His nickname's Ezra. Yeah, there'll be a little bit of friendly banter going on there, and maybe a little watch along too for the Broncos game there. So keep eyes peeled for that one, folks.
All right, the Paracave podcast by the fans, for the fans. Go Para!
Thanks for listening.